The desert world stretched as far as the eye could see. Red dust rolled across the plains in endless waves, pushed by a dry wind that whistled between sharp rocks. Above, the twin suns of the planet burned like two watchful eyes, their light harsh and unforgiving. It was not a world made for comfort, yet it was here that a lone human walked. His name was Ravi. Ravi had been traveling for days, surveying the land for signs of water, minerals, or anything that might help his mission. His boots crunched against the cracked ground, and every step echoed with weariness. Still, his eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon with steady patience. Exploration was never easy, but he had chosen this life because he believed in it. To him, discovering new places was worth the hardship. He carried only a pack with supplies, a field scanner, and a small first aid kit. His training told him to keep moving, but his heart often told him to stop and look. On this day, as he paused on a ridge to drink from his flask, his gaze caught something unusual in the distance. At first, it seemed like a mirage. A figure, small against the vast land, stumbling and struggling to move. Ravi narrowed his eyes, shielding them from the glare of the suns. The figure was not human. The shape was slender, the posture strange, and the faint shimmer of light surrounded it as though the air itself bent differently around its body. Curiosity pushed Ravi forward. He adjusted the strap of his pack and began walking toward the figure. Each step filled him with both caution and intrigue. Encounters on strange worlds were rare. He had been alone for too long, and the thought of meeting someone or something was enough to make his pulse quicken. As he drew nearer, the truth became clear. It was a woman, but not of Earth. Her skin glowed faintly as if threads of silver light ran beneath its surface. Her hair, long and flowing, shimmered in hues of pale blue under the suns. She leaned heavily on one leg, her steps uneven. Every few paces she faltered, clutching her side in pain. Ravi stopped at a safe distance. His instincts told him to be careful. He did not know her nature, her strength, or her intent. But as he watched, she stumbled again, falling to her knees with a cry that was soft yet filled with exhaustion. The sound carried across the silent desert and struck his heart. Compassion overpowered caution. Ravi moved closer, his steps firm but calm. The woman lifted her head and their eyes met. Her gaze was bright yet clouded with pain. She made a motion with her hand as if warning him to stay back. Her voice followed, melodic and filled with tones he could not understand. Ravi raised his hands slowly, showing they were empty, his posture open and peaceful. "I am not here to hurt you," he said softly, though he knew she could not understand his words. Still, tone often carried more than meaning. She tried to stand, her legs trembling, but her injured limb gave way and she sank back down. The glow on her skin dimmed like a fading flame. Ravi hesitated only for a breath before rushing forward. He crouched near her, leaving space so she would not feel trapped. Her breathing was ragged, her expression mixed with fear and pride. Her injury was clear. Blood, though not red but a pale blue liquid, stained her leg where jagged rocks had torn through her skin. The wound looked deep. Without help, she would not last long in this harsh land. Ravi reached for his pack and carefully took out his water flask. He placed it before her and stepped back. She looked at it, then at him, suspicion still in her eyes. Slowly, she reached out, her fingers trembling, and lifted the flask. She sipped the water, her throat moving gently as she drank. When she returned the flask, there was a flicker of something new in her eyes. Perhaps trust, perhaps relief. Ravi nodded in encouragement. He then pointed to her leg, making a gesture of bandaging. She tensed, shaking her head. Her pride resisted his offer, and her fear of the unknown man made her cautious. She spoke again in her melodic language, her words strong but weary. Ravi could not understand, yet he felt the weight of her refusal. He sighed and sat back on his heels. For a moment he let silence stretch between them. The wind carried dust around their forms, and the distant cry of unseen creatures echoed faintly. This world was not safe. Time was against them both. Ravi thought about leaving. His training told him it might be wiser. She might not trust him, and staying near her could bring danger. Yet his heart would not let him walk away. He had seen the pain in her eyes, and it reminded him of a truth he had always believed, that helping someone in need was what made a person truly human. So he stayed. He tore a strip of cloth from his sleeve and slowly held it up for her to see. He pointed again to her leg, then to the cloth, miming the act of wrapping it. His hands moved carefully with no sudden gestures. The woman's eyes studied him, her breath still uneven. At last, her shoulders lowered and she gave the smallest nod. Relief washed through Ravi. He moved closer, kneeling beside her wound. The sight of her blood stirred unease in him, but he pushed it aside. With gentle hands, he cleaned the wound with water and wrapped the cloth around it, tying it firmly yet carefully. The woman flinched once, a soft sound escaping her lips, but she did not pull away. When he finished, he leaned back, giving her space again. She looked at the bandage, then at him. For the first time, her expression softened. Her lips moved, shaping words he did not understand, yet her tone carried gratitude. Ravi gave a small smile and placed a hand lightly over his chest, then pointed to himself. "Ravi," he said. She blinked, repeating softly, "Ravi." Her voice shaped the name in a way that sounded almost like music. Then she touched her chest, her fingers glowing faintly, and said, "Nira." The exchange of names was simple, but in that moment, it felt like a bridge between two worlds. The suns were lowering in the sky now, and shadows stretched long across the desert. Ravi knew night would bring colder winds and unseen dangers. He looked at Nira, still weak, her injury slowing her. She could not travel far alone. He realized he would have to stay by her side, at least until she was strong enough to move or until help arrived. For now they were two strangers in a vast land, bound not by language but by need. Ravi adjusted his pack, settled beside her, and kept his eyes on the horizon. The encounter had begun, and neither of them knew where it would lead. But in that silence, as the twin suns dipped lower, one thing became clear. Human compassion had already taken its first step across the divide between their worlds. The night arrived swiftly on the desert world. When the suns dipped below the horizon, the heat vanished, replaced by a biting cold that cut through the air like glass. The silence grew heavy, broken only by the whisper of wind and the soft rasp of Nira's breath. Ravi wrapped his jacket tighter around himself, but his gaze stayed fixed on her. She sat leaning against a rock, her eyes half closed, her glow dimming like a fading ember. Ravi knew she was still weak. The bandage on her leg was holding, but the wound beneath was deep, and without proper care, she might not survive long. His supplies were limited. His first aid kit had more bandages and a small antiseptic, but it was designed for human wounds, not alien ones. He could only hope his knowledge would be enough to keep her alive. Through the long night, Ravi remained awake. Every sound in the distance made him tense. The desert was not empty. He had already seen signs of life, strange tracks in the sand, faint cries carried by the wind, and shadows that moved too quickly to be illusions. He had his survival knife ready, though he knew it would not be much against larger creatures. When the first light of dawn crept across the horizon, he turned to check on Nira again. She stirred slowly, her eyes opening with effort. The glow in her skin returned faintly, like the first rays of morning. She tried to shift her body, but the pain in her leg made her wince. Ravi knelt beside her, gesturing toward the wound. He spoke softly. "We have to change the bandage." She could not understand his words, but when he lifted the fresh cloth from his pack, she understood the meaning. This time, she did not resist. She let him carefully unwrap the bandage. Though her jaw tightened as the fabric peeled away from the wound, Ravi cleaned it again with water, then applied the antiseptic. The liquid stung her skin and she cried out, her voice rising like a note of sorrow. For a moment her hand shot forward, gripping his wrist tightly, her strength surprising despite her weakness. Ravi froze, his eyes meeting hers. She breathed heavily, her glow pulsing with distress. He spoke in a calm tone, even though he knew she could not understand. "I know it hurts, but this will help you." His voice was steady, gentle, carrying reassurance. Slowly, her grip on his wrist loosened. She let him finish his work, her gaze softening with trust. When he tied the new bandage, he gave her a nod, and she responded with a faint smile. It was small, but it was enough to tell him he had done the right thing. Hours passed as the day grew warmer. Ravi knew they could not stay where they were. The desert was dangerous, and he needed to find shelter or water. He pointed to the horizon, then back to himself, then to her, as if asking if she could move. Nira looked at her leg, then at him. With great effort, she pushed herself upright, leaning on the rock for support. She took one step and nearly collapsed. Ravi caught her quickly, holding her steady. Her body trembled with pain, and her face showed frustration. Pride was clear in her eyes. She did not want to appear weak before him. She tried again, her jaw set in determination, but the pain made her falter once more. Ravi placed her arm gently over his shoulder, supporting her weight. She resisted at first, shaking her head, her voice rising in her melodic language. It was clear she did not want to depend on him. But her strength gave way and she nearly fell again. Ravi held her firmly, not letting her hit the ground. Their eyes met and for a moment neither moved. Finally, she gave a small nod of surrender, allowing him to support her. Together they began to walk. Her steps were slow and uneven, her body leaning heavily against his, but they moved forward. The land ahead stretched endlessly, a sea of sand and stone. Ravi guided them toward a cluster of jagged rocks in the distance, hoping to find shade or a cave. Every step was difficult. The weight of Neera on his shoulder was heavy, and his legs burned with effort, but he did not stop. As they walked, Ravi noticed her trying to communicate. She pointed at the ground, then at the sky, speaking words that sounded like songs carried on the wind. He could not understand the meaning, but he listened carefully. He pointed at himself again, repeating his name, Ravi. She nodded, then touched her chest, saying, Neera. They exchanged names again, this time with more strength in their voices. It was a reminder of who they were, two beings from different worlds walking together in struggle. The journey was slow. Twice they had to stop so Neera could rest. Ravi gave her sips of water, though his own supply was running low. He shared it without hesitation. He had always been taught that survival meant conserving resources, but looking at Neera's pale face and trembling body, he could not bring himself to deny her. By midday, they reached the cluster of rocks. To Ravi's relief, there was a small cave hidden between two boulders. It was narrow but deep enough to provide shade and protection from the wind. He guided Neera inside and helped her sit against the wall. Inside the cave, the air was cooler and the silence was softer. Neera leaned back, her glow brightening slightly, perhaps from relief. Ravi set down his pack, then crouched beside her. He checked her bandage again, relieved to see it was holding. For a time they rested. Ravi leaned against the wall, his eyes drifting to the entrance of the cave. He thought about Earth, about how far away it was. He thought about his mission and how unexpected this encounter had been. He had not planned to find another being here, especially not someone in need of help. Yet deep inside he felt that this meeting had meaning. His thoughts were broken by a sudden sound. A low growl echoed from outside the cave. Ravi's body tensed. He slowly reached for his knife, his heart beating faster. He motioned to Neera to stay quiet, pressing a finger to his lips. The growl came again, closer now. A shadow passed across the entrance of the cave. Ravi crouched low, his muscles coiled, ready to defend if needed. He glanced at Neera. Her eyes were wide, glowing brighter with fear. The shadow moved on and the growl faded into the distance. Ravi exhaled slowly, his grip on the knife loosening. Neera's shoulders relaxed, though her breathing remained unsteady. Ravi moved closer to her, speaking softly. It's all right. It's gone. She could not understand the words, but his calm tone eased her. She leaned her head back against the wall, closing her eyes. As the hours passed, Ravi began to see small changes in her. Her pride was still there, but her trust was growing. She allowed him to adjust her bandage without protest. She accepted water from his hand. And once, when the silence stretched long, she reached out and touched his arm lightly, as if to say thank you in her own way. For Ravi, that simple gesture carried more meaning than words. He smiled at her, and she smiled faintly in return. The struggle of the day had tested them both. Ravi's strength had kept them moving, but Neera's willpower had carried her through pain. They were strangers still, yet already something unspoken connected them. As night fell again and the cold crept back into the desert, Ravi settled near the cave's entrance, keeping watch. Neera slept lightly behind him, her glow pulsing softly in the darkness. The struggle was far from over. Danger still surrounded them and survival was uncertain. But for the first time, Ravi felt that he was not alone in this harsh world. And perhaps neither was she. The second night in the cave was long and restless. Ravi did not sleep much. He sat near the entrance with his back against the stone, listening to the distant cries of the desert's creatures. The cold air seeped into his bones, but he stayed awake, watching over Neera. Her glow flickered faintly in the dark, a reminder that her strength was still fragile. When dawn broke, pale light crept into the cave. Ravi stretched his sore muscles and then turned his attention to her. She stirred slowly, her eyes opening with effort. The glow on her skin brightened a little as she woke, but the strain on her face told him she was still in pain. He reached for his pack and pulled out the last of his medical supplies. The field kit was simple: bandages, antiseptic, a few tools, but it was all he had. He knew the wound needed more care than he could provide, yet he had no choice but to try. Ravi crouched beside her, lifting his hand gently to signal his intent. He pointed to her leg, then to the kit, waiting for her response. Neera's eyes met his, filled with both fear and acceptance. She gave a small nod. With careful hands, Ravi unwrapped the bandage. The wound was raw, the pale blue blood still seeping slowly. His heart sank. If she had been human, he would have worried about infection. With her, he had no knowledge of how her body healed. All he could do was clean it and hope her strange biology could recover with time. He took a clean cloth and poured a little water onto it. As he dabbed gently at the wound, Neera flinched, her hand tightening around the rock beside her. Ravi paused, his voice calm and steady. "It's all right. I'll be careful." She could not understand the words, but his tone softened her expression. He continued, slow and patient. His touch was steady, his movements careful. When he applied the antiseptic, her body jerked and a soft cry escaped her lips. Instinctively, she reached out, her hand gripping his arm. Her fingers glowed faintly against his skin, a strange warmth spreading where she touched him. Ravi froze for a moment, surprised by the sensation. It was not painful. Rather, it was almost soothing, like a gentle current running through him. He looked at her, seeing both pain and trust in her eyes. She was holding on to him, not in rejection, but in need. He gave her a reassuring nod and continued his work. She did not let go of his arm. Instead, she kept her grip as if his presence gave her strength. Ravi finished cleaning the wound and wrapped it again with fresh bandages, tying them snugly. When it was done, he sat back, allowing her space. Neera's hand slipped away, but the glow in her skin brightened, faint but steady. She looked at him for a long moment, her lips moving softly as if whispering a word he could not understand. Ravi smiled, tapping his chest. "Ravi," he said gently. She touched her chest in return, her voice soft but musical. "Neera." The exchange felt different this time. Not just names, but a bond. The hours passed quietly. Ravi gave her small sips of water, rationing what little remained. Hunger gnawed at his own stomach, but he did not complain. He had learned long ago that survival was about patience as much as strength. At midday, he tried to encourage her to move her leg. He gestured carefully, pointing at her wound, then at her knee, miming the motion of bending. Neera frowned, shaking her head. The pain was still strong, but Ravi insisted with gentle persistence. She sighed, then attempted to shift her leg. Her face twisted with discomfort, but she managed to bend it slightly. Ravi nodded, giving her a smile of encouragement. She tried again, this time holding the motion a little longer. It was progress, small but important. As the sun lowered, they shared another quiet meal from his limited rations. He split the food evenly, though he knew he should conserve more for himself. Watching her eat slowly, her glow strengthening bit by bit, made the sacrifice worth it. The night came once more, bringing cold winds that howled through the rocks. Ravi built a small fire from scraps of dry brush he had gathered earlier. The flames flickered weakly, but they gave warmth and light. Neera sat close, her eyes reflecting the fire's glow. For a time, they sat in silence. Then Neera lifted her hand, pointing at the stars visible through the cave's entrance. Her voice rose softly, speaking in her language, her words flowing like music. Ravi listened, though he could not understand. She pointed again, tracing patterns in the air as if explaining the constellations. Her eyes glimmered with a quiet sadness, perhaps speaking of her people, her world, or something she had lost. Ravi wished he could understand. All he could do was listen and offer his presence. When she finished, her gaze turned to him. She gestured to the stars again, then to him, questioning. Ravi looked up at the sky. Somewhere beyond those stars was Earth, his home. He raised his hand and pointed upward, speaking softly. "Earth." He drew a circle in the air, miming a planet. "My home." Neera tilted her head, repeating the word slowly. "Earth." Her voice carried the name with a strange beauty, reshaping it into something new. Ravi smiled. In return, he pointed at her, questioning with his eyes. She hesitated, then touched her chest and spoke a word, soft, lyrical, filled with meaning he could not grasp. He repeated it awkwardly, and she gave a faint laugh. The sound light and musical, that laugh echoed in the cave. And for the first time since their meeting, the weight of fear and pain seemed to lift. Later, as Neera rested, Ravi sat awake again, thinking about what had happened. He had touched her wound, felt her strange warmth, and seen her trust him despite her pride. He realized something important. This bond between them was not just survival. It was something deeper. Proof that kindness could cross even the widest gaps between species. The next morning, he checked her wound again. To his surprise, it seemed better. The bandages were clean and the strange blue blood had slowed. Her skin around the injury glowed faintly brighter, as though her body was beginning to heal. Neera tested her leg, moving it slowly. Pain still showed on her face, but determination burned in her eyes. She placed her hand against the cave wall and tried to stand. Ravi hurried to her side, supporting her carefully. Together, they took a few steps inside the cave. Her movements were shaky, her weight heavy on him, but she walked. It was the first time since he had found her that she managed more than a single step without collapsing. When she sat again, she looked at him with something close to wonder. She placed her hand over his, her glow spreading warmth through his skin. Her voice rose softly, speaking words he could not understand, yet the meaning was clear. She was thanking him. Ravi nodded, his own chest swelling with quiet pride. He had not saved her completely, but he had given her a chance to heal. And in return, she had given him something he had not felt in a long time: connection. The healing was not finished, but the first steps had been taken. The human's touch, simple and patient, had bridged the gap between them. As the suns rose higher and light poured into the cave, Ravi knew the days ahead would still be hard. Dangers lurked beyond the rocks and their supplies were running thin. But in that moment, hope burned brighter than fear. The healing touch had changed everything. The cave had given them shelter for 2 days, but Ravi knew they could not remain there much longer. His water supply was running low and the small rations he had brought were almost gone. Neera was stronger than before, but her leg was still weak and she could not walk far without his support. Yet staying meant certain death. The desert was full of hidden threats, and the longer they waited, the greater the danger. That morning, as the suns rose high in the sky, Ravi packed his things and helped Neera to her feet. She leaned on him heavily, her face pale but her eyes steady with determination. Together they left the cave behind, stepping once more into the wide and merciless desert. The land stretched endlessly before them, waves of red dust and jagged rocks glowing under the twin suns. Ravi guided them toward the east, where the scanner in his pack had once shown signs of underground water. If they could reach it, they might survive. Every step was a struggle. Neera's legs slowed them, but she did not complain. She pushed forward with quiet strength, her pride refusing to let weakness control her. Ravi supported her, his arm firm around her waist, his body bearing much of her weight. Hours passed under the burning light. Sweat rolled down Ravi's face and his throat grew dry, but he kept moving. He knew that if he stopped, Neera would not last. Each time she faltered, he whispered soft words, not for her understanding, but for her comfort. His voice, steady and calm, carried strength that her heart seemed to recognize. By midday, they reached a ridge of black stone. From its top, Ravi could see the land stretch out into a valley. His eyes narrowed. Movement flickered across the sand below. Shapes, low and swift, darted between the rocks. His chest tightened. They were not alone. He motioned for Neera to stay quiet. Her eyes followed his, and when she saw the shadows below, her glow dimmed with fear. She whispered something in her language, her voice trembling like wind through leaves. Ravi did not know the words, but he understood the warning in her tone. The creatures below were hunters. Ravi guided Neera carefully along the ridge, keeping low, hoping to pass unnoticed. But fate was against them. One of the creatures lifted its head, its eyes catching the light. A screech tore through the valley, sharp and terrible. In seconds, more shapes appeared, crawling swiftly over the rocks. The creatures were unlike anything Ravi had seen before. Their bodies were long and sinewy, covered in dark scales that shimmered in the sun. 6 legs carried them with terrifying speed. and their jaws opened wide, revealing rows of curved teeth. Their cries echoed across the desert, a sound that made the air tremble. Ravi's heart pounded, but he stood firm. He tightened his grip on Nira, guiding her quickly down the other side of the ridge. "We need to move," he muttered, though he knew she could not understand. She needed no translation. Her trembling steps told him she knew the danger well. The creatures closed in fast. Dust rose behind them as they ran. Ravi pulled Nira toward a cluster of rocks ahead, hoping to use them for cover. His lungs burned, his muscles ached, but he refused to slow. They reached the rocks just as the first creature leapt. Ravi shoved Nira behind him and swung his survival knife upward. The blade slashed across the creature's snout and it shrieked, tumbling back in pain. But more were coming. Nira, though weak, lifted her hand. Her skin glowed brighter than before, light flowing from her fingers like threads of energy. She thrust her palm forward and a burst of shimmering force rippled outward. One of the creatures was struck and staggered back, its scales flashing as it hissed in rage. Ravi's eyes widened. He had not known she could do this. Her power was faint, her body trembling with the effort, but it was real. Together they stood a chance. The battle raged in the shadow of the rocks. Ravi fought with his knife, slashing and striking with all his strength. The creatures lunged and snapped, their claws scraping against stone. Nira used her strange power, bursts of light pushing them back, though each use left her weaker. At one point, a creature slipped past Ravi and lunged for her. She cried out, stumbling back. Ravi turned just in time, throwing himself between them. The creature's jaws closed on his arm, pain tearing through him. Gritting his teeth, Ravi drove his knife into its throat. The beast thrashed, then collapsed lifeless at his feet. Blood seeped from Ravi's arm, but he ignored the pain. He looked at Nira, who had fallen against the rocks, her glow dimming again. Her eyes met his, wide with fear, not for herself, but for him. She reached out a trembling hand, and her fingers touched his wound. Warmth spread instantly. A soft light flowed from her touch, sinking into his skin. The pain eased, the bleeding slowed. It was not a full healing, but enough to keep him standing. Ravi looked at her with gratitude, and she nodded weakly, urging him to fight on. The creatures circled, hissing, their eyes glowing in the fading light of the suns. Ravi stood tall, knife in hand, his body tense. Beside him, Nira struggled to her feet, her glow flickering like fire. Together, they faced the last wave. Ravi struck with fierce determination, every swing of his blade driven by the will to protect. Nira unleashed her final bursts of light, each one scattering the creatures, each one dimming her own strength. At last, the survivors hissed and fled into the desert, their cries fading into the distance. Silence fell over the rocks, broken only by Ravi's heavy breathing. He lowered his knife, his body shaking with exhaustion. Nira collapsed against the stone, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her glow was faint, but her eyes shone with relief. Ravi dropped to his knees beside her, his arm still bleeding lightly despite her touch. He pressed a cloth to the wound, then looked at her. She reached out again, her hand trembling, and placed it over his. Warmth spread once more, gentle and steady. He met her gaze, and in that moment no words were needed. They had fought together, survived together, and trusted each other completely. As night fell, they found shelter deeper within the rocks. Ravi built a small fire, its flames flickering against the stone walls. Nira lay beside it, her body weak but her spirit unbroken. Ravi sat close, his eyes never leaving her. He knew the trial had changed them both. She had shown her hidden strength, and he had proven his resolve. 2 lives, once strangers, now bound by survival. Ravi whispered softly, more to himself than to her. "We made it." Nira's eyes closed, but a faint smile touched her lips. Her glow brightened just slightly, as if answering him. The desert night stretched long and cold, but in the warmth of the fire and the bond between them, hope burned brighter than the darkness. The night after the battle was long and restless. Ravi did not sleep much. He sat by the fire, watching the flames dance and listening to the soft wind that moved through the rocks. Nira rested beside him, her breathing steady though her body was weak. Her glow was faint but calm, like a star that refused to fade. Ravi's arm throbbed, but he ignored the pain. He had faced worse before, and the thought of survival gave him strength. What mattered most was the fragile life that lay near him. Nira had fought with him, bled with him, and saved him. She was no longer just a stranger. She was his companion, his responsibility, and perhaps something more he could not yet name. When the first light of dawn touched the desert, Ravi rose and studied the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, but far to the east he thought he saw a line of green. His scanner confirmed it faintly, signs of water and perhaps life. That would be their goal. He gently helped Neera rise. Her steps were slow, her face pale, but she gave him a look that told him she was ready. They moved forward together, each step heavy yet full of purpose. The suns climbed higher and the heat returned. The desert seemed determined to test them one final time. Sandstorms rose in the distance, twisting like angry spirits. Ravi pulled a cloth across his face and shielded Neera with his body as they pressed on. The storm bit at their skin, filling the air with dust, but they refused to turn back. By midday, their strength was almost gone. Ravi's water pack was empty and his throat burned with dryness. Neera stumbled and he caught her, his heart tightening. She was fading and he feared she would not last much longer. Yet just when hope began to weaken, the storm cleared and they saw it. Ahead, at the edge of the horizon, a patch of green shimmered like a miracle. Tall shapes rose from the earth, trees, their leaves bright under the suns. Between them lay the glimmer of water. Ravi's breath caught. Salvation was close. He carried Neera the final distance, his legs trembling under her weight but his will unshaken. As they stepped into the oasis, cool air touched their skin, and the scent of water filled their senses. Ravi laid her gently beside the clear pool, then cupped his hands and brought her water to drink. She drank slowly, her glow brightening at once. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at him, her lips moving with soft words he could not understand. Yet the meaning was clear: gratitude, relief, and trust. Ravi drank as well, the cool water reviving his weary body. For the first time in days, he felt hope surge within him. They were safe, at least for now. They remained in the oasis through the afternoon, regaining their strength. Ravi explored the area and found fruit-bearing plants and small creatures that could be hunted if needed. It was a paradise compared to the desert. He returned to Neera, who was sitting near the water, her legs still weak but her glow stronger than before. She looked at him and smiled faintly. Then she placed her hand over her heart and spoke a single word, slow and clear. Ravi did not know her language, but he understood the gesture. It was a promise. He touched his chest in reply. A bond had been formed between them, deeper than survival. They were no longer just two souls thrown together by fate. They were partners, protectors of each other's lives. That night under the stars, Ravi built a fire beside the water. The sky stretched endlessly above them, the stars shining brighter than he had ever seen. Neera sat close, her glow mixing with the light of the flames. For a long time they said nothing. Words were not needed. Their silence was full of meaning. As the fire crackled, Ravi thought of the future. Perhaps one day he would find his people again. Perhaps one day Neera would find hers. But for now, in this vast and lonely world, they had each other. And that was enough. The days that followed were kinder. The oasis gave them food and shelter. Ravi hunted small animals and gathered fruit, while Neera slowly regained her strength. She began to walk again, her leg healing with time. Sometimes she would use her light to help him, guiding him toward plants that were safe to eat or warning him of hidden dangers. Ravi watched her with quiet wonder. She was not human, yet her heart was full of courage and kindness. He realized he no longer saw her as strange or alien. She was simply Neera. One evening, while the sun set and painted the sky in gold and red, Neera stood beside the water and lifted her hands. Her glow spread outward, reflecting in the pool like countless stars. She sang softly in her language, her voice gentle and haunting. Ravi did not understand the words, but the sound filled him with peace. When she finished, she looked at him and touched her heart again. Then she pointed to the horizon where the desert stretched beyond. He knew what she meant. Their journey was not over. They could not remain in the oasis forever. Somewhere out there, others might be searching for her, or for him. Ravi nodded. He did not fear the journey anymore. Together they had faced the desert and lived. Together they could face whatever came next. The next morning he prepared for travel again. This time he was not afraid of failure. He had learned that survival was not only about strength but about trust. As he looked at Neera, walking slowly but firmly beside him, he felt certain they would endure. As they left the oasis behind, the desert no longer seemed endless. It was still harsh, still dangerous, but now it was only another path they would walk together. The suns rose high, casting their shadows side by side across the sand. Ravi glanced at Neera and she looked back at him. For the first time, he saw not fear or weakness in her eyes, but determination. In that moment, he understood the truth. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a story of two beings from different worlds who had found strength in each other. It was a story of hope, of promise, of humanity proving once again that even in the farthest reaches of the stars, courage and compassion could shine brightest. The desert stretched before them, but they walked with steady steps, their hearts bound by trust. Whatever awaited them beyond the horizon, they would face it together. And in that promise there was victory.